Welcome back, folks. Thanks for listening to another episode of The Veritas Road. I'm Carson, back here with Murph. Murph, what is going on, man?
Nothing much, man. Same as last time. I'm doing good. I'm very excited to talk about these things tonight, as I always am. But actually, I'm really, really excited about this. It's very interesting to me.
No, me too. We're in the middle of trying to cache some episodes for the summer, so this is like the third straight episode we've recorded today. So we're making it. We're making it through all these. What are we talking about tonight?
We're going to be talking about world religions. Surely that can't be controversial, right?
I mean, you'd think it wouldn't, but you can get into some real hairy stuff real quick.
Dude, I hope we can get into some deep stuff, because this is fascinating. Greek, Norse, pagan, Near East, Egyptian, and hopefully some Christian/Jewish, because they have the same base.
No, yeah, I think it's going to be really good. Is there any housekeeping we need to talk about before we get going?
I've never understood what that meant. What are we housekeeping?
Just the...
there's a lot of crap in your apartment that needs to be picked up.
The metaphorical house. The metaphorical Veritas Road house.
No, save that crap for the end, man.
All right, cool. All right, guys. So you and I sat down a few weeks ago now, and we're talking about some of the religions that we had studied out there, right? And
put studied in quotes.
Okay.
Kind of familiar with.
This
stuff
is
so
term.
Unbelievably complicated that it's not even funny.
Right, yeah, you can spend decades studying this kind of stuff and still not know much. Some of the religions that we had heard of out there. And one of the things that it appeared we both had noticed at different times was how weirdly similar a lot of these are.
Yeah, similar concepts, similar cosmology, similar gods, that kind of thing.
Which doesn't really make a ton of sense. Like, if you think about world religions the way we normally think about them, like they developed in different places at different times, and so it doesn't make sense for them all to have these incredibly similar overarching themes. Like, sometimes there are specific stories that are the same from one religion or mythology to the other, which is crazy. Like, you think of them developing in different places across the world. How did these people didn't even have contact with one another? What's going on?
Particularly if you believe the traditional view on how humans came into being, it really doesn't make sense.
Yeah,
because different cultures spring up from isolation. Is the traditional view, more or less.
Yeah, and then if you talk to like a lot of the people who follow I do a lot of studying in like evolutionary biology and that kind of thing for school. And a lot of these folks look at religion as an outspring of germ theory, almost, in that human beings needed something to help us stay clean and cleanse ourselves. And in a lot of religious rituals, there's a lot of cleansing stuff going on, right?
That's where religion came from?
It's been said before.
Interesting.
And so we came up with these themes and ideas, maybe not consciously, moving that direction, but over time we came up with these rituals and things to help keep ourselves alive, right?
Yeah, I don't agree with that.
Think about a lot of the cleansing rituals you see in things like...
I understand the point. I don't think that originated religion.
Well, I'm not saying you did.
Well, it just seems like what you were saying, but excuse me.
My point is that in the realm of evolutionary biology, the idea is that, different peoples came up with religion as a means of, keeping themselves alive and safe, safe from germs and infections and that kind of thing. And so looking at it through that lens, it also doesn't make sense why all of these stories and ideas would be so similar, because in that context, all you need is something that makes sure you wash your hands in the ceremonial water, right? The stories don't need to be the same.
Right. Pray away a plague or disease or whatever.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and they're not all... first of all, we're no experts at this at all, and we have to say this before every single show, but this is some deep stuff, and it even varies, like, in the religions. Like, there's a bunch of different stories. But,
yeah.
But I've kind of picked out some stuff that's generally kind of the consensus, even though we kind of bashed that last time.
We did bash that last time.
But take it for what it's worth, I guess is what I'm saying. There's quite a bit of differences, but we're going to point out the common themes, and they're big common themes is the point.
Yeah, for somebody like me to notice them, like I'm no religious scholar, for somebody like me to notice them, those themes must be pretty big and have some, I keep using the word similarities, but some striking similarities such that even somebody like me notices them. Yeah.
Well, let's quit talking about the similarities and actually talk about the religions we're going to talk about. What do you say to that?
Well, okay, yeah. So let's start off. I guess the most common one is the genesis of the world, the creation of the world. Like, how did people come to be here?
Well, I mean, even before that, how did the world come to be here?
Yeah.
Like, that's a pretty big question. That's pretty big.
I mean, that's the question that a lot of human life is focused on.
That's a pretty
still.
big thing to explain. So every culture had their own way. The Greeks. So this is kind of their story. In the beginning was chaos. And you can think of chaos as either an entity or as a void, even though those two things are kind of different, but for all intents and purposes, it really doesn't matter. There was chaos. Whether chaos is something or nothing, it's just chaotic. From chaos just emerged two gods, okay? Gaia, the earth mother, like Mother Earth.
Yeah.
Gaia is the earth. So if you can, basically it's like a personification. Gaia is the personification of earth, and she's a mother. And then Uranus, the sky, the father sky. So you've got Gaia and Uranus, mother and earth, springing from chaos. Follow me thus far?
I'm with you so far, yeah.
All right. So these two mated as man and woman do.
Oh, they did the nasty.
They did the nasty. And Gaia had a bunch of children.
She was fertile.
Yes, very fertile. Mother Earth is fertile.
Yeah, I like that. There. Okay, I'm with you.
Anyway, all the beginning children were like horribly ugly and deformed. Like she had a bunch of cyclopses, a bunch of 100-armed giants who were called a name I can't pronounce. So I'm not going to attempt it.
Okay.
It's a big long Greek name. But
all right.
So Uranus, the father, the sky, was upset that all of Gaia's children were really ugly and terrible and loud and obnoxious. So he imprisoned them in a place called Tartarus. You know what Tartarus is?
I would take a guess that that's what we in the West normally think of as hell.
Kind of. It's a little bit different. Tartarus is the deep, bottomless pit in Greek mythology.
Okay.
So it's also a thing that appeared out of the chaos. It was a god and it was a thing. Just like Nyx is night and Himera is day and Pontus is the seas. Tartarus is the bottomless pit.
So
he is the bottomless pit.
Yeah.
And he is a bottomless pit.
So you're saying that all of these natural phenomena are both the thing we observe in nature and also individual gods in and of themselves.
Yes. Yes, personification.
Okay.
So anyway, all these nasty children from Gaia who Uranus hated were imprisoned in Tartarus. Anyway, eventually Gaia had some kids that weren't hideous monsters. I think it's 12 of them. I didn't actually. It doesn't really matter. They're known as the Titans. Okay, and these are the first generation of Greek gods. So Gaia had some kids that weren't hideous, and you probably heard of some of them. At least I know you've heard of the Roman names, but their main dude is Kronos.
Heard of Kronos? I don't know anything about him.
I think Kronos is the youngest of the Titans, but he's also like the most daring and the most strong-willed. And he was the one who was willing to defy his father because Gaia was getting really mad because, I mean, her kids were getting imprisoned.
Yeah, they were in a bottomless pit.
Would that make you mad? That'd make me mad.
I'd be upset.
Even if they were ugly and hideous. So Gaia was like, we've got to come up with a way to destroy Uranus. So that's pretty intense. Gods plotting against each other to destroy each other.
Yeah, that's pretty bad.
Yeah, that is bad. So Kronos was like, yeah, I can do it. I'm strong enough and I've got the fortitude to do it. So as Uranus was sleeping, Gaia made a sickle. You know what a sickle is?
Yeah, that thing that the Grim Reaper carries around.
No, that's a scythe.
Oh.
That is not a sickle.
They all look the same to me.
A sickle is kind of like a scythe, but not really. But anyway, it doesn't matter. Yeah. Our producer just drew a sickle for Carson.
That was beautiful.
So you got that image in your head?
Thank you.
Everyone take this time to Google sickle and put it in Google Images.
This has turned into a more of a learning experience now.
Yeah, all right. Beating that dead hole. So, Cronus, however you say it, also known as Saturn. That's the Roman name.
Okay. Yeah, that's cool.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Thing. But Saturn's the sixth planet.
So all of our planets are named after these folks.
Oh, yeah. And it goes way beyond planets, but we can talk about that in the end. He castrated his father.
What?
Yeah.
That's disgusting.
That's a bold move, don't you think?
The Greeks were messed up, dude. Oedipus castrating their dad, like this is some messed up stuff.
Yeah, that's a pretty big deal. So he castrated his dad while he slept, and after that, this guy didn't come down and mate with the
Earth anymore. Yeah.
So that's how they got separated. You know.
Oh, it's a cool concept.
Yeah,
okay.
That's basically the concept behind that. Unfortunately, though, Kronos ended up being a jerk, just like his dad.
What a dick.
So Kronos married Rhea. Rhea, I believe, is his sister. She, in turn, is also kind of a earth goddess. I'm not really... Rhea is a really vague one, but another kind of earthy goddess. Earth Titan, I guess. Just call her an Earth Titan. Okay. So Kronos and Rhea got together, and there was a prophecy from one of the oracles. And I'm not sure.
Where'd these oracles come from?
Great question. I don't know. It's really, some of this is really vague. But anyway, they prophesied that one of Kronos' children would overthrow him.
There's a lot of overthrowing going on.
Yeah, that's going to be one of the common themes. I'm glad you pointed that out. But let me finish the story first.
All right.
So, one of Kronos' children was going to overthrow him.
Yeah. So
Kronos had all the children that you're very familiar with. I think he had 3 sons and 3 daughters. I believe that's right. Demeter. Well, I can't remember the daughters, but the sons, Hades, Poseidon, and everybody's heard of his baby, Zeus.
Okay.
Now, Rhea obviously didn't like it that Kronos was swallowing. Like, as soon as the baby was born, Kronos would swallow the baby.
That's not good, right?
Yeah, that's not good. So, they didn't die. They were just, like, trapped inside Kronos. Does this make sense? No, it doesn't. But this is just the story. So, basically, Rhea gets sick of this. So, she's like, you know what? I'm going to save my baby. Kind of like Moses being saved. So, she took a rock as soon as Zeus was born and wrapped it in swaddling clothes. And Kronos was like, give me that baby. Rhea, being smart, hands Kronos the rock and hides Zeus with the wood nymphs. And he's raised by the nymphs. Where did the nymphs come from? Don't know. There's probably stories on that. But
okay.
This is so much research I had to do that it's quite overwhelming.
Yeah.
But I'm just trying to get the basics. So anyway, Zeus, once he comes to manhood, after being raised by the nymphs, he's like, I got to free my siblings. Got to fight.
Got to cut a hole in Daddy's belly, right?
That's exactly what he did, man.
Oh, really?
Well, he ended up forcing his dad to regurgitate them, I think, and then he sliced a hole in his belly.
That's disgusting.
Yeah, so that started an all-out war because Kronos had a bunch of siblings too, right? Because he's just the youngest of the Titans. Like
okay,
There was 12 of them, and I think they ended up having more children. Basically, it's like races of gods almost.
Yeah.
So you've got the Titans, the first generations, and these gods, Kronos' children, were known as the Olympians, or they became known as the Olympians after they won this massive war among the gods. Titans versus Olympians. All of the Titans, except 2, were on the side, and then 2 of the Titans defected, and they're very important characters in Greek mythology, Prometheus and Epimetheus. And I'm sure you've heard of Prometheus, even if you don't know his story. Everybody's watched
I know the name, but I don't know the story.
Everybody's watched Alien,
well.
right? Alien vs. Predator, that terrible movie.
I've never seen it.
The terrible sequel, or prequel, Prometheus. So the big war. Eventually the Olympians win. Zeus forces all his children up out of his dad, and then they fight and they win. So as a reward for Zeus winning, the Titans are banished to Tartarus, and he releases all those ugly children of Gaia upon the earth. And that's where you get some of the stuff you hear about in the the war. What's the war? Iliad? Not the Iliad.
The Odyssey?
The Odyssey, yeah. That's where you get some of the stuff in the Odyssey.
Okay.
Those monsters. Anyway.
Yeah.
So because of Zeus's heroic actions, he becomes king of the sky and rules over all the gods. And that's how the gods of Mount Olympus took control of the world. So that's a telling of the Greek creation of the universe story.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. You got any thoughts on that?
I mean,
Give us some thoughts.
I'm most familiar, having grown up in like southern United States, right? I'm most familiar with Christian religious tradition, right?
Yep, as is most people in the West.
Yeah, and so when I hear stories like that, the first thing I do is compare it to, Christian biblical teaching that I'm most familiar with, and the first thing I thought about was the separation of the sky from the earth, which obviously in the Bible, God separates like the firmament, the sky, from the earth. You're talking about the sky and the earth being two separate entities that made it and then separated from one another. That's the first similarity that jumped out at me.
Yeah, so what does that tell you? The Greeks must have thought at one point they were together.
Yeah. Fascinating.
Let me go on to another religion to try to get them all before we talk about the similarities as a whole.
All right, yeah.
Okay?
Go ahead.
So now we're moving on to Norse. For those of you who don't know what Norse is, it's like Scandinavia, or at least northern Germany. So, northern Europe.
Okay.
Iceland, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, blah, blah, blah. So, they have of all the stories, this one I think is the latest. Like, it's the least old.
Okay.
It's also the most interesting in my opinion. But, so let me try to gather my notes here and talk about, in the beginning of the Norse world, there's two places. On one side of the infinite universe, you've got Niflheim, and that's the land of eternal ice and a bitterly cold wind. Okay?
That sounds terrible.
On the other side of the infinite universe in the Norse world, you've got Muspelheim, and that is the land of eternal fire and blazing flame. Okay? So you've got polar opposites on the opposite sides of an infinite universe. In the middle, there is a chaos.
Again, chaos.
Yeah, weird, huh? The chaos is the infinite void called Genundagap.
That sounds like a fun word.
Yeah, it is a fun word to say.
Genundagap.
So,
say it with me. Genundagap. All right, we can move on.
That's the void of the Norse world. So, over time, over eons and eons, the ice of Niflheim and the fire of Muspelheim get closer and closer and closer and closer until they finally touch. And when they touch, there's a giant born. And this giant's name is Ymir. Okay? He was the first.
I'm with you so far.
He is the first of... So there again, you've got God or something emerging from chaos.
Yeah.
So you've got...
these aren't... I'm sorry to stop you again.
No. Feel free to comment.
These honestly don't sound altogether too much different from the scientific origin story, in that in the beginning there was chaos, and then there was there was a chaotic singularity or whatever, and then out of the chaos was born Earth.
Don't even get me started on that, Carson. That's because you're also describing another religion, but that's a topic for later.
All right. I may have just stepped in a deeper puddle than I thought.
Yeah.
All right. Going on.
But that's a good point, though. You're right. Out of chaos comes something.
I mean, yeah. And I guess I look at all these things, all of these, like, where did human beings come from? Because as human beings, we all have this, for whatever reason, whatever you think the reason is, we all have this desire instilled in us to figure out how in the world we wound up here and why we're here, like what we're doing here.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a single person out there who doesn't have that desire and that drive to find that out. And I just think that's important to note.
Yeah, and all these ancient cultures, like, are they stupid or were they onto something? And that's what we can discuss at the end. So let me keep going. So Ymir, as he would sleep, a Muspelheim fire is hot, but Niflheim ice is cold. So you've kind of got the duality there. So as he would sleep, he would sweat, and the sweat droplets became more giants. And those giants are called I could be pronouncing this wrong. I like to say Jotun. Maybe it's Jotun.
All right.
Norse. But anyway, they're called Jotun, I guess. We'll just say
pick one and go with it.
I'm saying Jotun. Also, yeah, we've been confirmed from our infinitely knowledgeable producer that it's Jotun.
He has the internet. That means he's infinitely knowledgeable,
You have the internet
right?
too. It's right in front of you. Anyway, from the ice in Niflheim, something else emerged.
Bite me.
So notice that's not from the chaos this time. It's from the ice.
Okay.
Is a giant cow. And I'm going to butcher this name.
What?
Yeah. Unumbla. So a giant cow called Unumbla emerges from the ice at Niflheim, and that cow is licking around trying to get water. Very strange.
That's a weird image.
I know. Talk to the Norse about it. And the cow uncovers a dude or a deity. I guess you can't really call him a dude. Borin. I just think it's Bor. Buri. B-U-R-I. All right. So Unumbla uncovers Buri from the ice.
Okay.
And the giants were nourishing on her teat. So it's like as stupid as that sound, it's like the concept of the mother nourisher
Earth. Yeah. So
kind of. Yeah.
Yeah.
So giant cow. Buri has a son, and I could never find how he had the son, but he just had a son named Bor, and Bor married a giantess called Besla. Okay, you following me? So again, more god genealogy.
All right, so let's back up for a second because this is more convoluted than the last one. There's the guy that came from the meeting of fire and ice.
Yeah, that's Ymir. He's a giant. Ymir. One of the Jotun. The first Jotun.
A droplet of his sweat creates more giants.
Yes.
And then this cow is born.
Yeah.
Where does the cow come from again?
From the ice in Niflheim. Just coming from the ice.
The cow just is created from the ice.
Yeah.
And it's a giant cow, I guess.
Yeah, big cow.
And the giants suckle from its teats.
Yes, and as the cow licks, it uncovers Buri, who has a son named Bor. Bor marries one of the giants created from the sweat, Besla, and has a very, very famous son. Well, 3 sons, but I guarantee you've heard of one of them. Odin. Everybody's heard of Odin, right?
That's a cool name.
If you've watched Marvel, he's the old man king.
Yeah, yeah.
If you watch
Isn't he played by Anthony Hopkins?
I don't think so. Is he? Really?
He is?
Oh, We've got
confirmation that he did. Yeah.
Anyway.
Okay.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I learned something new.
Anthony Hopkins is a boss, man.
Oh, he's something else in Westworld, but that's another topic for later. Anyway, so Odin, Vili, and V are the 3 sons of the mating of Bor and Besla.
Okay.
Everybody following me thus far? These are the first gods called the Aesir in Norse mythology.
Wait, so all these people before them weren't gods, so to speak?
Well, they were like ancestor of gods. It's kind of like Titans versus Olympians, kind of.
Okay, yeah, I'm with you.
Kind of. And I'm not even going to get to the other gods, the Vanir, because there's just too much. So eventually the Aesir, or the predecessors of the Aesir, Odin and his brothers, basically, they grew untrustworthy of the giants. And so they're like, we got to kill them. So guess what?
There's another
war between gods. That's going to be one of the common themes. The Aesir attacked the giants. And another similarity, they killed Ymir while he slept.
What?
Yep.
Then they did that to Kronos too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So that's an odd common. So they drug his body into the Ginnungagap, and
there's that word again. I love that.
And his body is what became the 9 worlds. Now in Norse mythology, they believe Earth was actually 9 different worlds. I'm going to try to pronounce all their names. Some of them are easy because we've heard of them in Marvel. Asgard, Vanaheim, Alfheim, Midgard. Midgard is Earth, where we live. Jotunheim, Svartalheim, Myrkheim, and then you got Muspelheim and Niflheim, which were already there.
So we have the first multiverse theory.
Basically, there were 9 of them. Anyway, so Ymir's blood became the rivers and the seas, and his muscles and the flesh became the land. Vegetation gave rise to, or his hair gave rise to vegetation. His bones were mountains. His brains were the clouds. And one of the most interesting parts to me is his skull became the dome of the sky. In Norse
That's crazy.
Mythology. So basically, they thought the world was the body of a giant, of a slain giant.
If you think about it in relation to like geology, that almost makes sense. Some of that.
Yeah, the Aesir,
the comparisons
basically Odin, his brothers, and then all the offspring that came of them, all the famous one, Thor, Loki, all of them. They put sparks from Muspelheim inside the skull to light it up.
Stars. And thus the stars were born, yeah.
Mm-hmm. In the middle of all the North World, they thought a giant tree was growing called Yggdrasil. It's very hard to say. It's like a Y and then a bunch of G's.
All right.
And then the giants were banished to Jotunheim, and the gods built their home in Asgard. And that's the Norse creation of the world. So kind of different from the Greeks, but kind of similar.
Yeah, relatively speaking, like for cultures that were separated by a decent amount of space, those are relatively similar. Like you have gods being beget from chaos, and then gods being beget from those gods, and then rebelling against their parents, and then the world being created from,
Well, just wait a minute, because there's more.
All right.
Let's talk about Egyptian.
All right.
You ready?
I think so.
So guess what? Can you guess what's in the beginning in Egyptian?
Chaos.
Yeah. The watery abyss chaos called Nu.
But it was old.
Yeah, it was timeless.
That's
so
hilarious.
A tomb. Oh, I see what you did there.
Yeah.
I didn't pick up on that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
A tomb was the first deity to arise out of this watery, chaotic void. A tomb. A-T-U-M.
Okay, so I thought...
No, a tomb.
I saw a gravestone in my head.
Yeah.
All right, yeah, go ahead.
And his name means hidden or invisible. And he's the invisible god from which everything else came. The creator of the world, the Egyptians thought.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So his name is Atum. Atum vomited out some children. So
another regurgitation.
Yeah. I didn't even write that down on my notes, but that's true. It's like Kronos vomited out his children.
Yeah.
So Atum vomited out Shu, which is the god of the air.
Was it an Air Jordan?
Probably.
Sorry, that was a terrible joke.
I don't think he could jump as good as Michael Jordan. Boy, that dude could jump from the free throw line and dunk.
He's still alive, right?
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, that's totally not on point. Tefnut, Shu and Tefnut. And Tefnut was the
god. I've heard of Tefnut.
Of mist and moisture.
Gross.
Okay. So these two gods were given the task by Atum of turning the chaos Nu into order. And it was divided into darkness and light and set into place. Kind of sounds like the Bible.
Yeah, it sounds very biblical.
So the order, they had a name for the order. It was called Mayat. This is all, I am no language expert, so I'm butchering these.
Not an Egyptian scholar.
Yeah. M-A'-A-T. Mat, whatever.
How did you know that, Jonathan?
And it's represented by a feather. Yeah, Jonathan's given us clues, but that's already written down on my notes. So it's represented by a feather in like the hieroglyphs. Anyway.
Okay.
So that's kind of similar to if you read 1 John 1, kind of the logos. Like in the beginning was
order. Oh, I see. Yeah.
So the Egyptians kind of had a similar concept.
Yeah.
So Shu and Tefnut, guess what? They did the dirty, and they produced Geb.
All these gods are having sex.
Yeah, that's a very common theme. I guess how else would they reproduce since...
That's a fair point, yeah.
That's how... And the first one, since there was no one to mate with, they just vomited, I guess. But...
right.
So they had Geb, which is another Earth entity.
Okay.
And female. And then Newt, the sky, male.
So another Earth and sky. Yeah.
You've got another Earth and sky.
And they're separate.
Another male and female. And they were tangled away at first. I mean, they were tangled together at first, sorry. But
okay.
But Newt pushed him away because of Matt.
Okay, so let's pause. We have chaos again.
Mm-hmm.
A god that comes out of the chaos that creates other gods.
A tomb, yeah.
Yeah, and then more gods having sex.
Yeah.
That create other gods.
Yeah.
Which seems to be the overarching theme here.
That's a pretty similar theme.
And then the earth and sky seem to start out as one thing.
Mm-hmm. And it's like that in Egyptian mythology.
Which is really weird.
Now, in Greek mythology, they separated because they were mad at each other. But in Egyptian mythology, they separated because that's what the order dictated. So, Newt was like, I can't be with you, and we have to separate because of what Mayat, whatever, how you say that, dictates.
Yeah.
So that's how the earth and sky became separated. So you remember, so they also mated too. before they separated it. So, and they had a bunch of gods that I'm sure you've heard about.
These people were getting it.
Yeah. Osiris.
Heard of him?
You heard of Osiris? Isis. Not the Islamic terrorist group.
Heard of that.
Isis, the Egyptian queen of heaven. And Set. And Set is the god of chaos, among other gods, but those are the three main ones. So you've got Osiris, the god of like wisdom and judgment, and he's eventually held in regard as kind of the first pharaoh. And I'll explain that. I'll try to explain that in a minute. Isis, his wife, queen of heaven, queen of beauty and all of fertility and
Aphrodite.
Kind of similar to Aphrodite, yeah, and magic. She was heavily associated with magic.
The card game or like
No, not Magic the Gathering. No, we're talking about wave your wand type magic.
Okay.
Incantation stuff.
Yeah.
And then Set, the god of chaos and destruction.
Gotcha.
So those are like the three Egyptian pantheon. Kind of like those would be the equivalent to the Asir or the Olympians for the Egyptians. It's those guys.
Okay, yeah, I'm with you.
And,
okay.
And this is like real early Egyptian tradition, because there's also Ra, and he kind of merges with the tomb later, but I don't even want to get into that. So, Nut, the sky god, produced the rains which grew on the earth. So you've got, again, like God's like bodily functions making things, I guess, right. For lack of a better word.
So he's peeing on the world,
basically, or crying, or whatever you want to say. And then
pick your favorite.
So there's a big long story. This is like the most well documented Egyptian myth is Osiris's trip to the underworld. So basically, Seth, the god Seth, they're called either one, god of chaos, kills Osiris, and he's sent to the underworld to die. Isis is real upset. But I should have said they had a son called Horus. Okay. And Horus has this powerful all-seeing eye that can that he got from Atum, that can go anywhere and look into anything.
Wait, so that's this eye we see on like the tombs and stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like on the back of the money.
Yeah, that's the Eye of Horus. In my opinion, is what that represents. Other people would say that's the Eye of Providence, but we don't have to get into that right now. So Horus has an all-powerful, all-seeing eye. He goes into the underworld and sends the eye and resurrects his father, but his father was like, his spirit was too weak, so he decides to stay in the underworld, and he becomes the ruler of the underworld. So, long story short, then Horus becomes the king of Egypt, and all the other pharaohs descend from him. So that's how they claim divine right, and that's the Egyptian story of creation.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, a lot to take in. And I really wish the air conditioner was on because it's extremely hot in here.
I mean, it is warm in here, but I mean, I feel like we could take each and every one of these stories and talk about it for a couple of days and have plenty of material.
Yeah, that's why it's not even fair that I'm just trying to get through this, but. You know, we're going to draw similarities at the end. We got one more, okay? One more creation story. Can you handle it?
Let's make this one. Let's
listeners handle it.
Let's burn through this.
All right, so this is the pagan Near East, Babylonia, the Chaldeans, that kind of stuff. So we're talking about Mesopotamia.
Oh, okay, that's the word I was looking for, because I didn't know what any of those other things were. So,
all right, so guess what?
What?
In the beginning, before there was time, there was two different chaoses, or two different water bodies.
Oh, we have a couple of different chaoses
represented. Well, one of them represents chaos. There was Apsu, the Sweetwater Sea, and then Tiamat, the Saltwater Sea of Chaos. Which kind of makes sense, right? Because think about it, if you're living in the pagan Near East, the end of your world was a saltwater sea, right?
Give me a geographical.
Oh my gosh, dude. The Mediterranean Sea.
Okay. Or
the Persian Gulf, or the Black Sea, like anywhere as far as they knew humans were, it ended in salt water.
Okay.
Now, when you dig down, what happens?
You get sweet water.
You hit fresh
sea.
water.
Okay.
So that's kind of the idea. In the beginning, there were these two seas, and they were personified as deities, Apsu and Tiamat. When the two seas mingled together, the gods Lahamu and Lamu rose from the silt at the edge of the waters. So again, you've got gods coming from chaos as they mingled together.
Yeah.
Kind of similar to the Norse idea, kind of different, but it's a similar concept.
Two forms of chaos mingling together to create divinity.
Yeah. And guess what? These two did the dirty, and they created the gods Anu and Kishar. Guess what? Anu and Kishar. Come on, have you not learned anything? The sky god and the earth mother.
I was like, this was a very prehistoric time. Was very sexual. It sounds like. I guess there wasn't much else to do.
Yeah, we can talk about that at the end, at least on what I think that all means. I'm gonna chew this piece of ice, so keep going with that thought.
I mean, it just sounds like a very sexual time. I guess there wasn't much else going on. Like, it was dark and there was a lot of chaos. So what else are you going to do? Let's reproduce.
All right, whatever. And Anu is the supreme sky god, and he's kind of equivalent. I wanted to do Canaanite gods too. Canaanite is a little bit west of the ancient Near East, basically where Israel is now. But it's just too much. This is already too much.
Yeah.
So he's similar with the Canaanite god El. Also interesting. Just a quick side note. The Hebrew word for God is El.
I was going to say, yeah, that's something I'm familiar with.
There was a Canaanite god, the supreme god of the sky, called El. But we could talk about that at the end. I just want to get through the stories. I knew the sky god had two sons, Enlil and Enki, and these guys were like restless. So it's kind of similar to the children the guy had. They were like restless and mean, and and they were upon the surface of Apsu. Remember, Apsu was the Sweetwater Sea, and he couldn't get any sleep. So he was like, I hate these guys. They're constantly bothering me. They're constantly badgering me. They won't shut up. They won't quit walking around. Guess what I got to do?
Got to kill them.
Got to kill them. So what is that? Another war between the gods.
Yeah.
So Apsu wants to kill Enki and his brother. He planned their death with some of the first generation gods, but Enki heard about the plan. Basically, he found out. So it's like, Tiamat was real upset. So she was like, that Enki heard about it. She was like, I'm taking this into my own hands. I'm going to create a bunch of monsters, and they're going to kill Enki. And remember, Tiamat's the chaos god of the sea, goddess of the sea, of the salt sea. But Enki, by this time, had a bunch of brothers and sisters, and all the gods were continuing reproducing. So he was like, you know what? Let's make our own warrior god to kill Tiamat and all the monsters. Okay? You following me yet?
So
there's a
far.
lot to follow.
Yeah, there's a lot going on.
Tiamat, the chaos god, and Apsu. Enki kills Apsu. I forgot to mention that. He found out about the plan and then killed Apsu.
All right.
The Sweetwater. So Tiamat's mad that he heard about it and that he killed her counterpart. So she's like, send a bunch of monsters. Enki and a bunch of the new gods make a supreme god out of clay. So there's another supreme god concept, and his name was Marduk. And it said that he had 100 eyes, and they flashed lightning when he blinked and stared, and when he breathed fire. So
that's horrifying.
He became equivalent with the sun. Like, he had golden armor, and he had a flaming chariot. Sounds a little bit like Apollo.
Yeah, a little bit.
So anyway, there was a big war. Marduk gathered the four winds of the earth together and hurled a hurricane into Tiamat, which had become a dragon, personified into a dragon, to fight him. And he slayed Tiamat. Marduk was like, all the other gods were like, this guy is serious. He's going to be king of the gods. So it's kind of another Zeus situation.
Yeah. Something else I just noticed, and we can gloss over this. I just want to mention it before I forget. Why are there always 4 directions?
Dude.
Is that just a logical,
is
that just a logical thing for us as people, like having 4, like, north, south, east, and west, like 4 winds, 4 directions?
You know, the Bible says there's 4 corners of the earth.
Well, that's weird. But that's something I've never thought about. Like, we have 360 degrees in a circle, right? Anyway, go on. Sorry.
So Marduk put a hurricane in her mouth and let loose a golden arrow, and then cut the dragon in half. Half of the body that fell became the earth. The other half remained suspended and became the heavens.
So we have another separation of earth and sky.
There's another separation of earth and sky, kind of similar to the Norse death of Ymir.
Yeah.
And then the final story we all know by heart. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth.
Okay, so we're into Christian tradition.
He said,
now.
Let there be light. There was light. There was a formless void. His spirit was over the surface of the waters. You know, everybody knows that story, or at least is kind of familiar with it.
Yeah, I mean, not everybody is particularly as familiar with it as you and I are. So let's give everybody the short version of it.
Or just read Genesis 1.
I mean, yeah. So there's a God, an eternal God, who's always been around, who brings order out of chaos, kind of like the Egyptians did. Separates
the only
earth
difference.
and sky.
I just want to
go ahead.
Say this real quick. The only difference is there was a God before chaos. There was chaos, but above the chaos was a God.
Yeah.
And the chaos is described in Genesis 1 verse 2.
Yeah.
So keep going.
And so that God brings order out of chaos, separates earth and sky, and makes all the stuff that we have here on the earth. In the span of 7 days, what those are, who knows? And that's about it. As far as the Christian creation story goes, it's relatively simple.
Yeah, so, I mean, you want to talk about the similarities in those? We've kind of already touched on it as we've gone along.
Well, yeah, but let's take a second and go over it with a little more of a fine-tooth comb. So all of these stories they start with chaos. Period. They start with chaos. Why is that?
I guess, how far can you think back? What existed before everything? You've either got two choices, the voidless abyss of nothing, or the ultimate entity that can never be created.
Yeah, right.
Logically.
We have two options as human beings. Either all of this was always here, or there was something before this that didn't necessarily make a great deal of sense to our human brains. Something that we would interpret as chaos.
Yeah, I guess.
And
you just asked such a deep question, it's hurting my brain.
And I think the simpler of those two options is to assume there is something that exists outside of our understanding, coming from the perspective of somebody who lived 4,000, 5,000, however many thousands of years ago you want, a long time ago. The simpler of those two options is there's an entity that's a lot bigger and more powerful than me that made something out of all the craziness. That's the simplest option to you at that point when you're fighting for your life in the middle of sand dunes or whatever these people were doing. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, that's a pretty fair assumption. I mean, what you're saying is it's just easy to assume that this was created.
Yeah,
because you can see, you could just see the design, and you can also see as you age and as stuff goes farther along, it starts to break down again and return to the chaos.
That's a good point.
Which is one of the scientific laws known as entropy.
Yeah. People like to pull that word out all the time now, and it kind of gets on my nerves. I hear the word entropy all the time.
Well, it's very important. I think that's a law of thermodynamics, but don't quote me on that.
It is. It is.
Maybe the third one. I don't know. So, I don't know. That's an interesting concept. Of course, you've also got the Mother Earth and Father Sky.
Yeah.
Over and over again.
Right. That was the second thing I wanted to point out. Is we start out with chaos, and then we move on almost immediately to either an ultimate god of sorts, like a god that creates all other gods, or two that just seem to pop up out of nowhere, and those seem to almost always be earth and sky.
Yeah.
Again, why in the world is that? Why are all these so similar? Because we're talking about what? Christian tradition, Norse, Egyptian,
Greek.
These people weren't coming up with the same stuff at the same time in the same place.
Or were they?
Well, as far as I know, they weren't coming up
conventional
with the same stuff in the same time in the same place. Yeah. Right. So how did all of this, it's almost like these people were comparing notes.
Yeah, it certainly seems like it.
Which freaks me out a little bit.
Let's save our conclusions for the end. What's another similarity?
So we have Mother Earth and Father Sky. Why is Earth always mom?
Oh, that's another rabbit hole. The divine feminine, for anyone who wants to research that. I guess, on a simple explanation, it's the Earth is fertile. Women are fertile and gives birth to children. The Earth is fertile, gives birth to crops and trees and plants. So that's probably the simple explanation.
I think that is a good explanation.
Yeah, I think the real explanation is far more complicated, but we'll be here for hours. I can be here for hours talking about that.
No, I think we can run with that.
Yeah, so that's probably the easiest.
And then these people always seem to give birth to more.
Mm-hmm. That was the third one I wanted.
God-like entities,
like the genealogies of God. God's mating with other gods to produce more gods.
Right.
That's present in everything except Christian.
Except it is present in Christian.
That's what I was going to say. But there's something you can compare it to.
Yeah.
And I want to do that at the end because I also want to get to the creation of man and run through those stories real quick.
So you want to wait to talk about what I think you're talking about right now?
Yeah.
Gods mating with other gods. You want to wait to discuss?
So basically,
this appears to happen though in all.
Yeah. So those are the three similarities: chaos, Mother Earth, Father Sky, gods mating with other gods. At least in the creation of the world story, and war among gods.
Yeah, that was another one I was going to mention. There always seems to be some kind of
fight.
Yeah,
they're fighting. Whether you have Olympians versus Titans, Asir versus the Jotun, Enki versus Tiamat / Marduk.
All of these religions have some kind of war embedded in their tradition. Even Christian tradition, there's a war in there.
Yeah,
a war in heaven. They all discuss them, and that just blows my mind. How are all of these the same?
It's crazy. Wait till we get to the creation of mankind.
Okay, so let's move on to. I think that's the next thing we have on the docket is creation, right?
So the Greeks, like I said, during the war with the Titans, there were two Titans who defected the Olympian side, Prometheus and Epimetheus. Zeus gave them the task of putting order to the newly formed Earth. So Epimetheus was in charge of the animals, and he would give quality of the gods to the animals, like speed or flight or agility or whatever.
So each animal was endowed with a godlike quality.
From Epimetheus. Prometheus was given the task of making the first humans, and he made them out of mud, and he was like, I'm going to make these look like the gods.
Oh, well, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Okay, keep going.
So he made humans out of mud, formed them in the image of the god. Now Zeus was like, I want these humans to remain mortal, and I want them to worship us, and I want them to do work for us, and I want them to rely on us. Their whole purpose is to serve us. So this is what Zeus was saying. Prometheus was like, you know what? I don't really like that. I want men to be better. I want them to have a greater purpose in the world. So he's like, you know what? I'm going to trick Zeus. Prometheus killed a bull. Okay, so a bull is a common sacrifice to the gods.
He killed a cow.
Men would sacrifice
a male cow.
Yeah, basically. And he put the good meat of the animal, like a steak, and he put the intestines over it.
Okay.
All right. And in one jar, and in the other jar / bowl, he put the bones, but he hid it with fat. So you see what's going on here? The good meat is hidden by intestines. I'm just going to present this to Zeus as sacrifice from the humans. Good meat is hidden by intestines. Bones are hidden by fat. So what's Zeus going to pick? You're going to pick intestines or fat?
I'd pick fat.
Yeah, he's going to pick. That's what he did. He picked the fat, but then when he put up the fat, he realized there was bones in there, and he got really mad. And he was like, you know what? Humans can't have fire anymore. Boom. Or they can't have fire at all. They're going to... And it doesn't exactly make sense why, but he banned humans from using fire for anything other than sacrifice, basically.
That's kind of a dick move.
Yeah, so that kind of backfired on Prometheus. So he was like, you know what? I'm stealing it back. He climbed Mount Olympus and he stole fire and gave it back to the humans.
That's super cool. That's a cool story.
Yeah. There is so much metaphor we could talk about in that as to what I think that means, but I'm going to lay that aside. So,
what a teaser. All right.
Basically, he gave fire to man, and with fire, humans could... It's a kind of a similar concept to the knowledge of good and evil. Now they know how to care for themselves without having to constantly go to the gods. They can make their own weapons. They could find food and game. But with fire also brings the ability to forge weapons, and came war and came evil.
Okay.
That's one of the stories of good and evil. Yeah. So that's Prometheus and the fire and man. There's also Pandora, Epimetheus, and the box. Let me briefly describe that because that kind of is related to Eve. So Zeus, the first woman, Pandora, was not made by Prometheus, who made men. Women was made by a bunch of different gods. I think Hephaestus initially made her, and then all the gods gave her other stuff. So Pandora was the first woman. She was very pretty. Okay, Zeus gave her one final gift, a box that was sealed, and she was like, "Don't ever open this box."
Why would you do that?
Excellent question. I'm just trying to get through this. We could talk about that forever. But, of course, she was going to be like, okay, eventually her curiosity would get the better of her. She would hear these voices coming out of the box, and they sounded so lovely, and they sounded so beckoning. So she was like, I got to open it. So she escaped from Epimetheus, her husband, the brother of Prometheus, a titan. Anyway, that's not important. And opened the box, and all kinds of terrible creatures came out, man. They were like terrible voices, nasty looking lights, and basically like, if anybody ever seen Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix when Lockhart lets loose the pixies, that's kind of like what this is like. All right, that's a pretty good image.
All right. All manner of pestilence came flying out.
All manner of pestilence. So she was really upset, and she cried and she cried and she cried. But at the end, there was something still in the box, and she heard it fluttering around and calling to her, and she was like, I just opened this box, but my curiosity is going to get the better of me again.
I gots to know.
She got to know. So she opens the box again, and hope came out. That was the last thing that flew out.
That's so sweet.
Yeah. Why was hope bound in with all other evil things? Does that mean hope is evil?
I don't know. I'd like to think it's not.
But that's basically the story of the creation, the Greek creation of men, and kind of the fall. And as fast as I could do it, because... Ooh. We're kind of...
That was a lot. Yeah, we're already running short on time.
Yeah, we got all kinds of time. I just want to talk about the similarities at the end. So, there's kind of some similarities in the biblical account between woman being the one who caused the strife, basically.
Yeah, so, short version, right? Man's created by God out of mud. He sees that man's lonely and unhappy. He creates woman out of man's rib. They're
Oh, you're talking about the Christian. I was like...
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
That's what you were talking about, right?
Yeah, keep going.
All right. So, creates woman out of man's rib. There are two trees in the garden, the tree of life. They're put in a garden, by the way. Man and woman, they're in a garden. There's the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. They're told only to eat of the tree of life, not to eat the knowledge of good and evil fruit. And eventually, Eve is seduced into grabbing a piece of fruit by Satan, the evil god, in Christian tradition.
Well, it's actually just a serpent.
The serpent, right? It does just say the serpent. It never really says Satan. But it's always assumed that serpent is Satan, right?
Right.
And for another time. Seduced into eating the fruit. She eats the fruit. She convinces Adam to eat the fruit because he's an idiot. And they both eat the fruit, and God's pissed at them, and they realize they're naked, and then comes the fall of man.
Yeah. Which is
both idiots.
Basically wrapped into one, the concept of the fire, Prometheus, and the fire in Pandora in the box.
Yeah.
So that's the similarities there. I promise this is going to go faster. The Norse is way faster. So basically Odin and Vili and V were just walking around in the woods, and they were like, you know what, we're going to make something. And they formed the first two humans from ash trees. Okay, guess what their names were? This is what's so fascinating to me.
What are their names?
Ask and Imbla.
Ask,
A-S-K, and Imbla. That sounds to me a lot like Adam and Eve.
Yeah.
But and then they built a wall around Midgard out of Ymir's eyebrows to shield them from the giants. They built a wall at the end of Midgard to separate them from Jotunheim.
Okay. So we see another comparison there between Norse tradition and Christian tradition. Not so much one between Norse and Greek.
Yeah.
As far as the wall goes.
Yeah, but the
man and woman thing, we still see a big comparison. But in Christian tradition, they're in the garden of good and evil. And once they fall, once they eat of the fruit, they're kicked out. And God puts an angel with a flaming sword at the entrance to the garden and says, you're not getting back in.
So
we see that again in Norse mythology as well.
It's similar, different but similar.
Yeah.
A separation, a boundary, physical stuff too.
Yeah. We're kicking you out of this happy place.
Yeah, very quickly, I would describe Egyptian. It'll go fast. So Shu and Tefnut, you remember Earth and Sky. They were the children of Atum. No, they weren't Earth and Sky. Shu and Tefnut were air and moisture. Anyway, the children of Atum.
Okay.
They went into the watery abyss chaos of Nu because they were like, what's in here? What's in all this chaos? And they got lost. So Atum sent his all-seeing eye, which later goes to Horus, but that's a whole other story altogether. But he sends his eye. He could take his eye off, and he sends it into the abyss, and eventually they come back with his eye. And Atum is so happy that he cries. and his tears rain down on Geb, or Jeb, however you say it, and they become the first humans.
That's cool.
That's the Egyptian story.
That's a cool story. I kind of like that one.
Mm-hmm.
It's really sweet.
Short, sweet, and to the point.
Yeah.
The pagan Near East story of man, Marduk, you remember him, the mighty sun god who killed Tiamat?
Yeah, I'm with you.
That the other gods made.
100 eyes, right? Or 1,000 eyes?
The dude with the 100 eyes. You're
Bunch
right.
of eyes.
He wanted to make a creature that could bear the burden of all the work that the gods had to do on the earth, because the earth had to be tended to, right?
Right.
And the gods were doing that before men got there.
Yeah.
So Marduk was like, you know what? Instead of us doing all this crap, I will make men to do it. So the lesser gods appealed to him. He was like, we're tired of doing all this work to tend the earth. So he formed them from the bones of the monsters that Tiamat had sent after him. And he formed their flesh around them out of mud and breathed life into them. And that's how men were made, from the bones of slain gods. And that's the Mesopotamian story, more or less.
That's another good. I like that one too.
Yeah, and all this stuff has wild variation,
but the overarching themes stay the same.
Right. And you've already gone over the Bible.
Yeah, well, I see another similarity. I keep going back to Christian tradition because that's what I'm most familiar with myself. But as far as like Mesopotamian religious talk is concerned, it's very similar to that of the Christian in that in Mesopotamia, their people were made out of the bones of gods, right? And in Christian tradition, the Bible, the text that most teachings are based off of, tells us that God made man in his image, almost like with his bones. I see it as now. Mm-hmm. There's another, Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're right, and we'll get it all together in the end. The last couple things I want to mention, because we can't mention similarities without mentioning, it is the flood.
Yeah, that's one thing. I was even reading a book the other day that had mention of a flood, and I thought about all of the floods that seem to happen in a lot of world religions.
Did you know that the ancient Greeks had a myth about a flood?
I did not.
Well, let me
until just now
describe it to you.
All right, let's hear about it.
My dear friend Carson. I'm going to take a bit of this lemonade because it's extremely hot.
It is hot in my apartment.
I have to turn the air conditioner off because it's so loud. So
we didn't want you guys to have to deal with that.
Yeah, and it's the middle of the summer, and it's just creeping up, and I'm dying here. But anyway, so some time had passed between the creation of man. So some time has passed, basically. And men had become corrupt and ruled by greed. Sound familiar?
That sounds familiar.
They had abandoned peace. They were warring with each other. They had abandoned their sacrifices to the gods. So the gods were like, why in the world did I let Epimetheus and Prometheus make these guys? Right? They're annoying, they're irreverent, and they're doing all kinds of crazy stuff, and they're bothering me on Mount Olympus.
Humankind turns into a bunch of dickheads and piss the gods off.
Basically. So the gods get together and they're like, what are we going to do? Should we burn them all to death? That's what Zeus wanted to do. But I think Athena actually was the one in the story I read who's like, don't burn it to death because the fire might reach Mount Olympus.
Oh, that'd be bad.
So that's interesting right there, to say the least. So they're like, well, Poseidon can just flood the thing. So that's what they do. Poseidon struck his trident on the ground, and enormous cracks appeared in the ground, and water burst forth from the deep. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
There was this guy. His name was Deucalion.
That's a cool name.
He was half god, half man. He was the son of Prometheus, and his wife, Pyrrha, was the daughter of Pandora. So you've got Deucalion and Pyrrha. They were righteous humans, half humans technically, who still honor the gods with sacrifices in the temple. And Athena convinced Zeus to warn them because they were still sacrificing in the temple, and they were the only humans that were. So Zeus was like, okay, and he visited them and told them to build a boat.
All right, go ahead.
So Deucalion and Pyrrha survived in a boat.
All right.
And then once the waters receded, they repopulated the earth. And there's a weird story about them searching for an oracle, but I won't get into that because we don't have the time.
Okay, go ahead.
So that's the Greek story. Sound familiar?
That sounds very familiar. Let's hear about the next one.
Yeah. So you know about the Epic of Gilgamesh, right? Gilgamesh was...
Yeah, but let's talk about that for everybody else, Well,
I'll try to... You're going to have to help me with this because I'm not as familiar. Basically, Gilgamesh was the king of Uruk, which is a lot of people think that's Uruk. It's in Mesopotamia.
Yeah, I've always heard that it's Ur.
A city in... between the Tigris and Euphrates River. So, Gilgamesh was... he sought immortality for himself and one of his buddies. What's his buddy's name?
I honestly can't remember right now.
He was seeking immortality for himself and one of his dudes.
Yeah.
So they went and visited Ishtar, the Babylonian goddess of like sexuality and love and fertility or whatever, kind of like Aphrodite. And she initially wanted to be with Gilgamesh, and he was like, "No, I'm looking for immortality." And his buddy was like, "Yeah, he's looking for immortality," and he slapped her. And I was like, no, you don't slap a god. So he was struck.
That's a bad idea.
His buddy was struck with sickness, and he died. And this really upset Gilgamesh. So he went and looked for the guy that survived the flood.
Pause. Enkidu is his friend's name.
Yeah, that's his bro's name.
Which is a fun name.
Yeah, and Enkidu was dumb because he slapped Ishtar, and then he got sick and died.
That was a bad idea.
And really upset Gilgamesh because they're looking for immortality. So what was the survivor of the flood's name?
I don't remember.
Look it up. You got it right in front of you. So basically, he goes and searches out the survivor of this great flood, and he ends up talking about the great flood. Sounds a lot similar to the Bible. And then he has this task for Gilgamesh, and Gilgamesh actually ends up just not being immortal because he fails the test, I think. I think that's how it ends. I took a world literature class my sophomore year of college, and it's been since then since I've actually read this. But that's the gist of it. So basically, there's and this is older than the Hebrew written text.
Yeah, the Epic of Gilgamesh is really old. Yeah. I don't remember when it was written exactly, but it's old.
So, and there's another. Did you know there's another ancient Near East epic?
I did not.
Yeah.
What is it?
This one I think is more interesting. It's called the Epic of Atrahasis. Look that up. Type in Epic of Atrahasis. So
I don't know how to spell that.
It's Atrahas. Okay. Basically, it's very similar to the biblical account, which I find fascinating. It's also very old. There's tablets. I actually listened to the tablets on this on YouTube, and there's a bunch of parts missing, so it was kind of hard to go through. But anyway, humans were really noisy, and they're numerous, and they were constantly disturbing the gods. So Enlil, the brother of Enki, I don't know if you remember him from the Babylonian story, but he was the god that was being noiseless himself, so I guess there's some karma coming back to him for being noisy. So the humans were being annoying, and Enlil was like, we got to destroy them because they're being annoying. But Enki was like, okay, destroy them, but there's one guy who's good. It's Atrahasis and his wife. So he went behind his back and warned him with a vision of the flood, and Enki ordered him to build a great boat and to take his family, and what's so fascinating about this one, and many animals with him.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the mighty flood came down, and it was so big that even the gods were scared. Most of the gods were like happy that Atrahasis survived, except Enlil, and he was really furious. So they made a pact, though, that they would limit the lifespan of humans and limit their population.
So humans were a lot older before the flood, is what you're saying?
According to Atrahasis, the Epic of Atrahasis.
That's cool.
So, that sounds a lot like the story we know. So briefly describe Noah.
Yeah, so the story we're familiar with here in Christian tradition here in the southern eastern United States, the southeastern United States, is, humankind became too rowdy and obnoxious and stupid and sinful for God, and he got tired of it, and so he told the one righteous guy left on the earth, Noah, to build a boat for he and his wife and his 3 sons and their wives, and to take 2 of every animal, plus 7 of some kinds of animals, on this giant boat. And Noah builds a boat over a long period of time. I think it's something like 100 years.
100 years, yeah.
And eventually he ushers a bunch of animals onto the boat, plus all of his kids and his wife, and they float away till the flood's over. everyone dies.
Mm-hmm.
Everything on the face of the earth dies. And then they land on a mountain.
Yeah, the mountains of Ararat.
Yeah, and hop out and repopulate the earth.
Yeah. So we've been going for an hour.
Yeah.
But listen, man, let's talk about the similarities, because this is the meat. This is the
good stuff. I'm sorry this took so long.
Because I'm excited about this.
Yeah.
Tell me your thoughts.
So the first thing I noticed was chaos. Everything starts with chaos. Like everything we've talked about tonight starts with the idea of everything being just totally insane, crazy chaos. Which to me doesn't make a whole lot of sense as a human being. Like I was born into a world with order. I don't initially imagine chaos existing before everything I see before me. So why did people come up with the idea that chaos came beforehand? We kind of talked about this earlier, but that still blows my mind. Whether that was given to humankind or whether we came up with it, either way, it doesn't make sense.
Well, here's a logical question. Could it be that there was actually a formless void at the beginning of the world?
I mean, it could be. I don't know.
All the religions say so. Kind of sounds like there was probably a formless void.
So, I mean, that's the first similarity that I notice is chaos. The second being the presence of some kind of entity that exists almost in conjunction with the chaos.
Yep.
And a lot of the names of these gods are eluding me now because we've talked about like 50 tonight.
A tomb in Egypt, the Ymir in Norse, the I can't even remember the pagan Near East, and then you've got Gaia and Uranus in the Greeks.
Yeah, and then the Christian god, which doesn't have a cool name.
Oh, he does have a cool name, YHWH, but that's another episode altogether.
Okay. All of these gods seem to exist along with the chaos, whether that means they are part of it almost or exist alongside. These two ideas seem to go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's crazy how all of these traditions developed seemingly independently of one another. It's crazy. It's mind-blowing.
Yeah. Well, I would suggest that they didn't develop independently of one another.
Okay. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Or? Yeah,
this is probably going to be kind of controversial, but it's my opinion. You don't have to agree with me. I come from a Christian worldview. I believe that the Bible is the divine, inspired Word of God and all the truth I need to know in life. In that book, it describes something called the Tower of Babel. And at one point, all humans were together and of the same language and the same mind. Now, we don't have to talk about what they were doing at the Tower of Babel, but my point would be, according to the Bible, humans were all together in one place in the plains of Shinar. What the heck?
Wherever that is.
What the heck the plains of Shinar is, we could debate forever. But because of what they were doing, God was like, no, they can't keep doing this. I'm going to confuse their language. So they confuse their God confuses their languages. So they're like, we can't communicate with each other. So the people who spoke the same probably broke off with each other and moved away, and are describing the same events in their own way. And the stories have kind of changed and morphed over time. But rather than the traditional view of the world as being like, humans came from like animals or monkeys or whatever, and then slowly formed their own cultures as they branched off, and that's when culture was made. That's half true. They slowly formed their culture as they branched off, but their culture used to be the same. And all these ancient religions are describing the same series of events, just in different languages. What those ancient events are, maybe we can save for another episode. I'll just say read Genesis chapter 6, because when you read that, you start to realize that something happened, man. Something crazy happened. Like the sons of God came down and mated with the daughters of men.
Okay, so let's slow down here for a second. All right. You're suggesting that at one point humankind was all in the same spot.
Yep.
Had the same religious ideas and traditions.
No, had the same. We're seeing the same thing.
Okay, we're experiencing the same thing at that point, and then an outside force, divine in nature, caused confusion of language confusion, to confuse everybody's language.
Yeah.
To the point that humankind could no longer, like, different peoples couldn't communicate with one another. People scatter because they can't all talk to one another, and then form different religious traditions based on the story that's passed down.
And the stuff that those original people who had been confused on what they saw.
Yeah. That's okay. Okay.
I mean, that is not at all mainstream, but
that definitely is not.
That makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, clearly, whether or not you think that's true or not, clearly there were some similar things happening.
Yeah, no, if I've learned nothing else tonight, I've learned that a lot of these different world religions are similar in the weirdest ways.
Yeah, man. I mean, so and they all share. It's all similar to the Bible. The Bible has the chaos. Genesis 1 verse 2. God's Spirit was hovering over the void of the deep. Okay, the Bible has not so much the Mother Earth and Father Sky, but kind of. If you get into the esoteric Gnostic stuff, there's definitely the Mother Earth that's present, and the Father Sky is kind of God himself, at least the Old Testament God. There's also an angel associated with Mother Earth, Ariel, in Catholic tradition. But
like the Under the Sea girl?
Yeah, like the Under the Sea girl, but instead she's an angel.
My mom wouldn't let me watch that as a kid.
Really? Because Ursula was so scary?
No, because Ariel wore a bikini.
No. Well,
I was very sheltered.
So then you've got war among the gods, at war in heaven. You've got both.
Yeah, that was another thing that I noticed.
That's in Revelation. Satan rebelling against God, taking a third of the angels with him. That's also in the book of Enoch.
Greeks rebelling against each other. Greek gods rebelling against each other.
It's all in there.
You see that in all of these traditions.
Yeah, and you've also got gods mating with other gods and gods mating with people.
Yeah, so that's
Even
something.
in the Bible.
Right, that's something we didn't discuss in relation to Christian tradition. Where I think it's still in Genesis, I believe.
Well, there's very little in Genesis, but it is in Genesis. Genesis chapter 6.
The sons of God. Genesis chapter 6. Then it talks about the sons of God mating with daughters of man.
Yeah, and their children were men of renown, or mighty men of renown. And that's all. Yeah, that's all the Bible says.
Yeah.
The book of Enoch goes into much more detail. A brief synopsis: basically, 200 angels. A class of angels known as Watchers decided that they were going to go down with the women and mate with them because they were so fair. Kind of sounds like Pandora,
Yeah,
anyway, so they were going to go down, mate with them, and their children were the Nephilim, as described in Genesis chapter 6.
So in all of these stories, you have a divine presence intermingling with this created mankind.
Yeah.
So producing offspring.
So we got to get to the conclusion of that. What does that mean, man? That probably means a divine presence came down and made it with mankind, if everybody's saying it. Or unless you think all these ancient cultures were just stupid.
I guess
I'm asking you. What do you think?
My own personal opinion?
Yeah.
I mean, I try not to offer my own personal opinion too much here.
Well, this is one where this is tons of speculation anyway. You kind of got.
We are speculating wildly. I mean, my own opinion, having just tonight heard all of it, like, this is all new information to me outside of the biblical stuff. This is all new to me, right? If I were to draw a conclusion, which is going to sound insane to future employers, I hope they're not watching this. My assumption would be that a divine presence, assuming a religious worldview, a divine presence comes down and intermingles with humanity. Period. I think that's the only conclusion you can draw given that information, right?
Yeah. It's just fascinating.
But in our sterile scientific world, we don't like to think about things like that.
Yeah, it's
that makes people uncomfortable.
That's. I think this is the last point we can make. You've got similarities in all ancient world religions, even current religions now in Christianity, and then you've got what we're told happened, which is man took millions upon millions upon millions of years to evolve from monkeys, and that religion just developed from ways to explain their reality because they were too stupid to understand the science that's actually behind it.
But see, this is where I think you and I start to differ on opinion a little bit. right?
You not agree with what I said there?
Well, I mean, so I'm a religious person. I'm a religious person. I have, though, always hopped on board with the idea that biology and evolutionary biology are useful things as far as studying of the human body and such things are concerned. Not necessarily as, religious text, but when I'm trying to figure out how to inform, like, evolutionary medicine, for instance. That's a field that I'm a huge fan of.
First of all, you got to define that, man.
Well, so one of my favorite things to learn about right now is medicine and lifestyle enhancement in light of the way people most likely used to live. So, people have experienced life this way, X way, right? Like they used to hunt for their food and gather stuff. And so we as human beings are built through whatever means to exist that way, be our healthiest living that way. And I think that does a lot to inform the way we treat chronic illness now, right? So now we have a lot of issues with things like diabetes and chronic disease and whatever, obesity, what have you. 1,000 years ago, I sincerely doubt that was a problem.
Yeah, you're talking paleo stuff by Rob Wolf.
Well, not him specifically.
But that's kind of the stuff he believes in, right?
But he's one of the people that informs us.
I just want to ask you a question. What does that have to do with evolution?
Well, okay, so the idea is that through the lens of biology informed by the process of evolution, we can make assumptions on how to progress medical science. That doesn't necessarily mean that is... I don't look at it as religious text. I just look at it as a scientific framework. Those are two different things, in my opinion.
Well, I would counter that with being like, that doesn't have anything to do with evolution. You're talking about biology as humans were most naturally. I say we're closer to their origin, right? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Now, that could be evolution. I don't think it is, but I don't think evolution is necessary for that study to be valid. It's the study of humans and their naturalness as close to origin as possible. And obviously we've deviated far from origin. And we can adapt, and those adaptations are built into our DNA. And that kind of sounds more like you're talking about, like, going back to the wild way of doing things.
Yeah.
The wild way of doing things is just origin.
Right.
And in my opinion, origin is not evolution. And that's kind of my take on that whole paleo health. Because it definitely makes sense. It definitely makes sense that you want to be closer to the original intention of, you call it nature, call it God. Humans are healthier that way. Yeah. To go on the health tangent. But that doesn't mean...
Sorry, that's just home for me, so that's the first thing I think of whenever
No.
Discuss stories like this.
No, I just don't think... In my mind, I do not see how evolution is necessary for that line of thinking to be valid. That's just my opinion on that.
I don't know that it is necessary. I just think it is useful, especially when trying to communicate with the mass populace.
Well, I mean, then are we even defining evolution? I'm trying to get an evolution, but you're talking about adaptation, man. You're not talking about change from, like, fish to reptile, and reptile to mammal, and then mammal to monkey and monkey to man. How does that have anything to do with what you're talking about? You're talking about humans in their natural form and their wild form, hunting and gathering, back when humans were, I guess you would call it, less civilized. What does that have anything to do with changing among species?
I don't. I hadn't thought about it that way.
That's my point.
We'll relook at it.
Now, if they have explanations for that, I'd love to hear about it. I just don't make the connections between that and evolution. I just don't. Maybe that means I'm dumb.
Well, it would take another half hour to discuss those assumptions, and I don't think we have time for that.
That's true.
But I'll take another look at it. I'll take another look at it.
Make me feel better. And make the listeners feel better.
Would that make everyone feel better?
For those that are still listening to this madness.
For all three people that are still listening to us?
Paleo health and crazy gods mating with men.
Yeah, which all of this sounds insane, probably.
Yeah, but it's fun to talk about.
It's so we can make I think you can make a movie about all this stuff.
They've made many movies about
it. Would be a ton of fun.
Let's go into movie making. Let's spend another like $20,000. Let's just waste the rest of our money and try to make movies.
All right, deal. So anyway, are there any other big similarities between these religions that you can think of? Because I've kind of exhausted mine. Oh, yeah, the flood.
Yeah.
We haven't really brought that one up.
That's the last one.
That's so crazy. There is this. There's this. I'm gonna slow down. Take a beat.
There is this. Normally, it's me doing that.
Right.
So I'm glad you're screwing up. Call it the deluge if that makes you feel better.
That's a good one. Yeah. There's this overarching theme in all of these of a flood, a deluge, some kind of giant rain.
Yeah, and it's not like I just went over like 3 or 4 stories.
Yeah,
the Native Americans have stories. I've even read the Aztec one. I didn't put it in here because this is already way too long. The Chinese have one. The Chinese have one that sounds just like Noah and Altrahasis, where they save a dude and his wife and the children, and they get into a boat. And that's in China. Oh,
I read another one the other day, and I think I told you about it. In Lloyd Alexander, if anybody's familiar with his work, he wrote the Prydain Chronicles. There's a character in his story called Medwin, and he bases a lot of his work off of like Welsh mythology. And Medwin is this guy who is like this caretaker for animals, and lives like in the mountains where no man can find him, only animals can find him. And in the book, the main character Taran and his compatriots are following a horse who leads them to Medwin's cave, like Medwin's little alcove in the mountains, right?
Sounds like Radagast.
And in the Chronicles of Narnia?
No, in Lord of the Rings.
In Lord of the Rings, it's been a long
wizard.
time. Anyway,
you're offending me right now.
I'm so sorry, buddy. Anyway, they make their way to Medwin's little cove, and he's this old dude with a giant boat. What appear to be the remains of a giant boat sitting in this alcove in the mountains.
Yeah.
And appears to have gotten there through some giant flood of their world. Prydain is the name of their world. Appears to have made it there through some giant flood.
Yeah, but keep in mind he based this on Welsh mythology.
Yeah.
So there's kind of a Welsh story.
Yeah, right.
Along with a Greek story and a Chinese story and a Native American story and a Mesopotamian story and the Bible story.
Yeah.
So what conclusion does that lead you to, man?
Yeah, so my assumption is at some point
there was a flood.
There was a flood. Some kind of giant rain / the seas overflow. I don't know. Some big flood.
Yeah.
Because whether it was people in one place observing it or people all over the globe, whatever lens you want to look at it through, like people appear to have the same story in different places, different languages. It's all the same, relatively speaking, which is crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy, and but again, we're told in mainstream scientific history that all that stuff is just a myth, and everything changed over thousands and millions of years, and there may have been the only cataclysmic. Yeah, the only that word event they talk about is the meteor that killed the alleged meteor that killed the alleged dinosaurs.
Alleged?
Yeah, and you know how many? First of all, fun fact, you know how many millions of years ago that was? I believe this is right.
33 million.
Close, 66.
66 million years ago.
I believe it's 66 million years ago. But anyway, that's the only really cataclysmic event they talk about. Everything else is so gradual. Whereas in oral tradition of every single religion and mythology on Earth, they had this cataclysmic flood.
Yeah.
So which one's right? I guess what I'm asking the listeners and you is, all the ancient people just dumb and they're looking for ways to explain the reality, or did they see something and they're telling people and it gets diluted through time?
Yeah.
Which way is it? I tend to go the second way because it makes more sense to me. But
yeah, but I mean,
you make up your mind for yourself on that.
That's something for those people to decide for themselves. I do want to say, if there's one thing I've learned studying, health and wellness over the past couple of years, it's that traditional cultures have way more wisdom than we give them credit for.
Yes.
Like, spend 30 minutes and just skim through Weston Price's Nutrition and Physical Degeneration book, and you'll discover how much knowledge a lot of these I don't know what to call them. I always call them traditional cultures, but like savages almost is the word I reach for. Like cultures that don't have the benefits of industrialization. Yeah, these cultures have so much knowledge that we in the westernized world have lost.
Well, we just think we're so special with our technology, our iPads, our power, our infrastructure, our planes, our cars, and we are missing
so much
wisdom. Man.
Yeah.
Just the way the world operates. Even ancient knowledge has been hidden. Excuse me, I just burped. Has been hidden from us. And how arrogant is it to say because we have all these things we've got it figured out?
Okay, so we're
everything we believe is opposite of what they believe.
Yeah, I want to take you down a very short rabbit hole, and then we'll try to wrap this up soon.
All right, we're docking the boat this time.
Yeah, I like that. We're going to the boat. Yeah. That's cool. Because of the flood. Yeah, I get it.
Everyone laugh.
In that same book, the Prydain Chronicles, there's this guy.
Don't ruin it for me, but keep talking.
Okay, there's this guy named Iran, and he's like the bad guy. He's like the
really?
The
His
Satan.
name is Iran, and he's the bad guy?
Aran, Arawn, I think is the name. And in the book, there are these ancient tools. I want to say there are 7 of them, but I could be wrong. Ancient tools that the people of Prydain used to have that made life so much easier to live, like a plow that plows itself, a loom that works on its own, things like that. And over time, these tools are lost to Iran's dungeons, right? And it's just the most mind-blowing thing.
If that's not a truth drop, then I don't know what is.
That is that. Forget like the whole. That's just such a great metaphor for the way we're living now, because all of the ancient wisdom that we as human beings have had is gone.
It's lost in a dungeon of whatever you consider Satan to be.
You can't say it any better than that.
This stuff just makes me so happy. It's so much to discover out there, and maybe you think everything we just said is crazy, but what you can't deny is those similarities between the stories.
That's the one thing that you actually can't deny.
Don't attack our craziness. Either decide for yourself that either these cultures are just archaic, explaining away their reality in the best way they know how,
which is a possibility in this case,
or they're onto something.
Yeah.
And again, it goes back to the ethos, pathos, logos. How are you going to discern that for yourself?
Right.
And
we've come full circle.
Cannot help you with that.
Yeah. That's something you have to do on your own.
Hopefully you trust our ethos, but if you're just doing that, then you're not going far enough, fellas. Man or woman who's listening, you're not going far enough.
I agree. So guys, thank you again for listening. This has been a ton of fun for us. I hope it's been half as much fun for you guys as it's been for us.
Yeah, I can't wait to turn on the air conditioner. I'm dying.
Same. So that being said, we will be talking about a lot of cool stuff coming up. I think we have an episode on the Georgia Guidestones coming up here in about a month.
Elberton County, yeah.
And a couple other things. We haven't ironed all of that out exactly yet. But stay tuned. It's going to be some really interesting stuff. Check us out on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all of the social media websites. I don't know what other ones there are.
Those are the main 3. And you can watch your stuff on YouTube and BitChute. Listen to it on Anchor and Spotify and Apple and Google.
We're all over.
If you like at all what we're saying, you can hopefully help us out a little bit, because I bought a camera and then it got stolen, so I bought the camera again. So we're way in the hole in money.
Yeah, we're broke.
And we could use a little bit of cash, even just $1. If you like anything we're saying, if you want us to, and give us suggestions on topics. We got our email, theveritasroad@gmail.com.
Yep.
I'll read everything. I would love to read what people say and mention it on here.
And we'd love to talk to you guys, honestly.
Yeah, and have you on the show. Just, I would say I'd pay for your plane ticket, but I have no money and I have no job. But, if you want to get on this show, I'd love to talk to people. Dude, we're in an interesting time in the world right now. Like, 2020 has been craziness, and we got to talk about it. And there's just call it an awakening, call it whatever you want.
Yeah.
Like, the world is changing.
It's gone crazy.
So it's a great time to be talking.
It is. And that's the big thing. It's just talking.
Mm-hmm. Talking and thinking.
So, all right, guys, don't forget to think for yourselves. And
that's right.
Thank you for listening.
We're landing the boat after 6 months of coronavirus.
All right, folks. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks for listening. See y'all next time.